Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Desiree Sorensen Groves, and I'm the director of the Arctic Refuge Defense Campaign. Welcome to Rally for the Refuge. The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is literally one of the last truly wild places on the planet, with millions of migratory birds, polar bears, brown bears, wolves, muskox, wolverine, and the porcupine caribou herd, upon which the Gwich'in people depend on for their survival. Indigenous peoples, both Gwich'in and Inupiat, have relationships with this land that go back millennia. And today, you'll hear directly from these people about what's at stake. Indigenous peoples, environmentalists, and others have fought back efforts to drill for oil and gas in the Arctic Refuge for decades. And we successfully beat back every effort until the 2017 Tax Act was passed and included a provision to open the refuge to natural resource extraction. This allowed the Trump administration to embark on a rushed and error-filled process to conduct a lease sale before Trump left office, which he did on January 6th, the very same date and time other things were happening at that building behind me. However, President Biden had made a campaign promise to protect the refuge, which he upheld on his first day in office with an executive order halting all activities in the refuge. And just a couple weeks ago, Interior Secretary Haaland followed suit, calling for a new environmental review of the leasing program because the one conducted by the Trump administration was so flawed. Unfortunately, even though President Biden and Secretary Haaland have taken steps to temporarily stop oil and gas activity in the refuge, drilling is still the law of the land. That is, until Congress reverses it. It's up to Congress, these folks behind me, to take legislative action to restore the long-held protections for this sacred place. There are some places on planet Earth just too important to destroy. And that's why we're here today. You'll be hearing from leaders in the conservation movement and Indigenous leaders why the time is now and Congress must act. First up, let me toss this over to Bernadette Dementjev. She's the executive director of the Gwich'in Steering Committee. She'll tell you exactly what this place means for the Gwich'in people and how you can use your voice to stand with them in their fight to protect the Arctic Refuge. Take it away, Bern.
Thank you so much, Desiree. I am excited to be kicking off this rally for the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, joined by all of you from across the country. Wow, there's so much of you. Jin Gwinzi, Shoji Bernadette Dementjev Oji, Shahan Betty Fit Oji, Shiti Bernard Hornsby Oji, Kuchajak Kutsan Ithli. My name is Bernadette Dementjev. I am the executive director of the Gwich'in Steering Committee, and I am from Fort Yukon, Alaska, which is 8 miles above the Arctic Circle. Happy to be here. I have traveled thousands and thousands of miles to share the story of the Gwich'in and our fight to protect our sacred lands in the Arctic Refuge. Known to everybody else as the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, it's known to us as Ijikwatsan Gondai Gotlit, the sacred place where life begins. I have been to Mexico, New York, Scotland, Washington, D.C. multiple times, and city after city, month after month, to share the voice of the Gwich'in and the many of Indigenous peoples in Alaska that do not want any destruction or development in our sacred lands in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. The Gwich'in have always had a spiritual and cultural connection to this area, way before there was a government, way before there was activists or environmentalists. We have always protected this area, and we will always protect this area. Seeing you all here today, it just gives me hope. It gives me strength, and just knowing that we have so much people that love and care. It's really overwhelming and it's really emotional, and we thank you. We have to stand together, not just for the Arctic Refuge, but for all public lands and for the Indigenous peoples that are fighting for their ways of life all across this country. The last 4 years, we have been completely disrespected and disregarded. And we thank President Biden for his quick response in addressing many of those issues. he has chosen one of the most respected and honorable women to lead this fight. And for that, I say Masit Cho on behalf of the Gwich'in Nation. Thank you very much, President Biden, for keeping your word. We need you to do more. We need more. We need permanent protection. I do not want my daughter to be sitting in my seat in another 30 years. Our children should not have to deal with climate change on top of a government that wants to destroy sacred lands to our people. And now I would like to happily introduce Representative Huffman, who's a great friend and a big champion for the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge.
Hi, everyone. And Bernadette, thank you so much for those powerful words and your continued leadership. As always, you are a dynamic force and an inspiration for all of us. You and I have done a few of these rallies together, and I'm glad to be joining you, along with some of my fellow colleagues, representatives from the Gwich'in and Inupiaq communities, conservation leaders, and all the folks tuning in around the country in this new format. Now, whether you've had the privilege to visit the refuge's vast, untouched wilderness or personally witness the tremendous ecological diversity it sustains, I think all of us recognize that the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is a unique national treasure that must not be squandered for short-term fossil fuel profits. We may not have the same deep multi-generational connection to this beautiful landscape as the indigenous people whose subsistence, culture, and way of life have depended on it since time immemorial. But we nevertheless can appreciate that there are some places so unique, so wild, so irreplaceable that they simply must be protected. For years, we have worked against the Trump administration every step of the way in their rushed, thoughtless attacks on the Arctic Refuge. And we're just as committed to protecting this treasured place in the new Congress, where we thankfully have strong climate-focused leaders like President Biden and Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland to partner with us. On his first day in office, President Biden signed an executive order placing a temporary moratorium on oil and gas activity in the refuge, as well as an executive order prioritizing tribal sovereignty and self-governance in use, management, and conservation of public lands. Unfortunately, we were just dealt a blow by the district courts who blocked President Biden's moratorium on new drilling, temporarily blocked the moratorium. This setback will not keep us down. This reversal shows exactly why we need to keep pushing for permanent protection. And with this Congress and administration focused on climate solutions and protecting public lands, there's a lot we can do to reach that goal. Earlier this year, I reintroduced my Arctic Refuge Protection Act, which restores the protections the Arctic Refuge and coastal plain previously had to prevent oil and gas exploration. The bill would also protect the region by designating the coastal plain as wilderness under the National Wilderness Preservation System, while safeguarding the subsistence rights of the Arctic indigenous peoples. We must stop any oil and gas drilling in the refuge for the health and the perseverance of tribal communities and precious ecosystems, and to prevent the worst consequences of the climate crisis from occurring. I think we can do this, but it's going to take all of us working together to save the Arctic and our planet. And you can count on me to back you up every step of the way. So thanks for being partners in these efforts, and a special thanks to the Alaska Wilderness League and tribal leaders who have been working tirelessly to save the Arctic Refuge. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Representative Huffman. My name's Laura Deehan, and I'm the State Director at Environment California, and I am so grateful to be here today with our Hill Champs, coalition partners, members and supporters all across the country. While this might be our first virtual Arctic rally, it certainly is not the first time that we have gathered together and rallied to protect the Arctic Refuge. In fact, we've done that in Washington, D.C. and all across the country over the last 20 years together. And so we thought it would be really fun to kick off our rally today with a short video that shows some highlights from Arctic Refuge rallies around the country over the last 20 years.
All right, well, let's hear it for people power. My name is Ben Hellerstein, and I'm the State Director for Environment Massachusetts. For decades, people like you have been raising your voices to protect the Arctic Refuge. And someone who's been in this fight longer than just about anybody else is our next speaker and the U.S. Senator from Massachusetts, Ed Markey.
Thank you all for assembling today to help defend the Arctic Refuge. This sacred place where life begins remains under threat from oil and gas drilling, from climate change, and from outside forces that want to jeopardize this natural wonder and the rights of Indigenous peoples. On his first day in office, President Biden took action to protect the Arctic Refuge by signing an executive order that halted oil and gas activity in the refuge. While this was an important first step, it was only a temporary fix. Now, with drilling leases in oil company hands, we need to make long-term protections possible through legislative action. On February 4th of this year, I reintroduced the Arctic Refuge Protection Act of 2021 with 27 of my colleagues in the Senate. This bill would permanently protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge from oil and gas drilling by designating more than 1.5 million acres of the refuge as wilderness, while preserving the subsistence rights of the Arctic Indigenous peoples. The Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet. Climate change is putting the entire region and all the people and species that live there at risk. We don't need to increase that devastation by disrupting and drilling in the Arctic Refuge, especially to produce more oil that will only make the climate crisis worse. President Biden has committed the U.S. to cutting its greenhouse gas emissions by at least 50% by 2030. The push to drill for oil in the Arctic Refuge has no place in that plan. It is critical we take legislative action to restore protections now. Our public lands are our nation's greatest treasures, and the crown jewel of this collection is the Arctic Refuge. Its pristine landscape, ecological integrity, wildlife, such as polar bears and caribou, recreational opportunities, and Alaska native cultural and subsistence values are unmatched. Our refuges should be just that, a refuge from drilling, development, and despoilment. In the Senate, I will keep fighting to protect that sacred place from being sold to the highest bidders. So thank you all for all of your tireless advocacy and for your invaluable work. And I look forward to continuing to partner with all of you on this fight for the refuge and our shared future. And as we fight, we have to remember Adam Colton and all of his incredible work. I just love working with him, love partnering with him. He truly was a great leader. And in his memory, we have to continue this fight, and ultimately, so that children have to look to the history books to find that there ever was such a day when the refuge was threatened. Thank you all so much for everything that you do.
Hi everyone, my name is Jen with Defenders of Wildlife. I am based out of Anchorage, Alaska, and I am excited to introduce our next guest speaker, who is a TV presenter, conservationist, and wildlife biologist, Jeff Corwin.
I'm Jeff Corwin, TV presenter, conservationist, and longtime supporter of Defenders of Wildlife. Now, my love affair with Alaska's wilderness and wildlife goes back more than 25 years. But, my friends, my mission is always the same: to elevate conservation voices, shine a spotlight on imperiled wildlife, and help people take action to protect our natural heritage. My work to protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, though, is no different. My journeys to this remarkable ecosystem are inspired by its beauty, people, and wildlife. Each spring, millions of birds migrate from the Arctic Refuge to the lower 48 states. Mother polar bears and their cubs emerge from their winter dens, and caribou mothers trek hundreds of miles to the refuge's coastal plains to give birth. The Arctic Refuge is, well, it's like no other ecosystem on Earth. And today, I join the Rally for the Refuge to help protect this iconic landscape for all those who call it home.
Hello, my name is Carla Nitchok, the Alaska State Director for the Wilderness Society. I'm coming to you from Anchorage, Alaska, on the unceded territory of the Dena'ina people. I want to thank Jeff Corwin for being with us today on this digital rally to protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Jeff, we thank you so much for all of your continued conservation work, and especially for the important work you're doing to protect the porcupine caribou herd birthing grounds in the Arctic. I had the distinct pleasure of meeting you in 2006 in Nome, Alaska, and we can't thank you enough for all of your efforts in conservation. Thank you. I also want to give a shout out to the members of the Wilderness Society. Thank you for being here today with us on this digital rally, and thank you for your continued support and dedication, not only for protecting the Arctic, but for your work in conservation. Today I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our next guest, Chief Dana Tisha Tram from the Vuntut Gwich'in First Nations in Canada. Chief Tisha Tram has been a strong advocate for mitigating the climate change impacts on Indigenous people in the North. And I just personally want to thank Chief Tisha Tram for all that you're doing to lift up sovereignty and self-determination of the Inuit and the Indigenous people of the North. We can't thank you enough. Kuyanakpak. So without further ado, I now turn the mic over to Chief Tisha Tram. Kuyanak.
Tringwinzi Shalaknai. My name is Dana Tisha Tram, the chief of the Vuntut Gwich'in First Nation in the village of Old Crow in northern Yukon. One village among many within the Gwich'in Nation, which stretches from northeast Alaska through northern Yukon into the NWT. I'd like to thank all of the fellow presenters and the partners who made this possible today, as I consider this to be an incredible moment in which to reach out to people. Here on the Canadian side, we've endeavored for decades for the conservation of the porcupine caribou herd. You can see this in documents like the International Agreement over the conservation of the porcupine caribou herd between the US and the Canadian government, all the way to unprecedented efforts like the parties to the Porcupine Caribou Management Agreement, which consists of the governments of the Gwich'in, the Trondak Gwich'in, Nacho Nayakdun, other regional Indigenous organizations, as well as the Yukon Territory, Northwest Territory, and federal governments. You can also see this in conversations between our leaders, the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, as well as President Joe Biden, in their commitments to a new pathway to an all-new partnership. The porcupine caribou herd has rung the bell and resonates through all levels of government. But today I am not just speaking to you as the leader of my people. I am not just speaking to you as an Indigenous person or as a Canadian. I'm speaking to you as a human being. We all know and are all affected evenly by the raised stakes that anthropogenic climate change presents us. How are we to bring paradigm shifts in our societal systems through industries, through governance, every sector? What will we be communicating to the future generations if we simply allow these pristine lands and these renewable resources, such as the porcupine caribou herd, to be bulldozed for temporary gains? How am I to turn to my grandchildren and look them in the eye and tell them that this was an economical choice? This language is a language of a time that is already gone, and pressing on us now is a future that we're not even sure of yet. But I know from the dreams and aspirations of my elder that have framed my life today, as we build the dreams and the houses of our visions that our grandchildren shall grow up in, the dream is important, one of balance and one of them thriving in the future. And although we may not know what that will look like, we can work together to achieve this today. And if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? There is more at stake than a porcupine caribou herd. There is our futures and what we communicate to those generations. Masi.
Thank you so much, Chief Dana, for your words, your leadership, and as always, your inspiration. This is starting to feel like a proper rally. My name is Monica Shear, and I'm the Director of Outreach at Alaska Wilderness League. A few weeks ago, when we started tossing around the idea of hosting a virtual rally, I can say none of us really knew what to expect. But wow, you have blown it out of the water with your attendance and inspiration and passion today. Big shout out to all the Alaska Wilderness League members that are joining from across the country, and a big welcome to all of you as well. We're all here for this place, this very important Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. And I have the great pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Isaiah Horace, who is a Gwich'in Youth Council member for the Gwich'in Steering Committee. And I had the great pleasure to get to know while we worked together on a series of events in LA not that long ago. Isaiah, over to you.
Thank you, Monica. My name is Isaiah Horace, and I'm a member of the Gwich'in Steering Committee Youth Council. I am honored to be part of this event that includes so many of our Gwich'in leaders, members of Congress, our partners, and so many others from across the country. So I joined in the year 2019 in August, and I was excited to be a part of the Gwich'in Steering Committee Youth Council so that I could learn more about the skills of being a leader, as well as learning more about my culture in the Gwich'in, and learning the skills of living off the land and off the rivers of fishing, so that I could pass on those skills as well to future generations. So as you heard, Ma'am Bernadette and Chief Dana mentioned, our culture and history as Gwich'in are tied to the caribou, and the caribou are tied to the Arctic Refuge. So as a youth council member, I have had on opportunities to learn more about my culture, our history, traditions, and our languages. So my elders started this work to protect the Arctic Refuge and our way of life so that before I was born. And it is important for me to learn as much as I can so that way that I can continue their work and also to provide and help more of my people. And our elders taught us that taking care of the land, the water, and the air will also take care of our children and the future generations to come. Our traditional knowledge taught us that taking care of the land will also keep the caribou healthy, and in turn will keep us healthy. The future of the Gwich'in and the future of the caribou work hand in hand and are one and the same. So I'll continue to work hard and make sure that the land, our caribou, and our future are protected for our children's children. And thank you for standing for us. Masi Sho.
Thank you, Isaiah, and to all the Gwich'in Youth Council members and young activists across the country and around the world using your voice for change. Thank you. You inspire me to work harder every day. I'm Brooke Brisson, a senior staff attorney at Trustees for Alaska. I live and work on the traditional and current homelands of the Dena'ina people in Anchorage, Alaska, and am grateful for their ongoing stewardship of these lands. Trustees was founded in Alaska almost 50 years ago to focus on Alaska issues. We're a nonprofit, public interest law firm that provides legal support and leadership on issues impacting Alaska's lands, waters, wildlife, and communities. We've worked for decades with Indigenous and conservation partners to protect the sacred coastal plain of the Arctic Refuge. And I'm thrilled to introduce today's next speaker, Sikanik Maupin, co-founder and executive director of Sovereign Inupiat for a Living Arctic. SELA was started by Signic and two friends to make sure that Inupiat voices are at the table when it involves the health of communities at large. Before she began her environmental work, Signic worked at the Arctic Slope Regional Corporation and saw firsthand how her own corporation wasn't listening to the people. Outside of her work as the executive director of SELA, Signic is raising children and dogs, making beautiful jewelry, healing through art, and sharing her worldwide view on TikTok. Thank you for sharing your time with us today, Signic, and I will hand it to you.
Pagalgifsi, Uvanga Signic, Aninga Runga, Utkiagavigmi, Akaga Harriet Mappin, Apaga Raymond Mappin, Akaluga Lina Kahakbak Simmons, Apagasi Abe Simmons Jr., Suvaktunga Director, Sovereign Inupiat for Living Arctic, SELA, Panega Willolu Sage. So I just did my traditional introduction and welcomed you all in Inupiatun. I am originally from Utqiagavik and my family also resides in Nuiqsut. I am based out of Fairbanks. And SELA was founded in late 2019, and we wanted to bring Inupiaq voices together that wanted to protect our lands and our ways of life. We are now under the umbrella of the Northern Alaska Environmental Center, and we have a growing membership of dedicated community members, and we are guided by our advisory team. We are a small grassroots organization that's growing, and we have fought endlessly to protect the Arctic Refuge, and Inupiaq lands have sustained our people since time immemorial. Currently, our traditional lands hold the largest oil field in North America. This has caused issues with toxics, pollutants, rise in respiratory illnesses, cancers. This is also contributing to the current climate crisis we're facing. We must divest from fossil fuels that are exacerbating the current climate crisis. We have 12 indigenous communities in Alaska that need immediate relocation due to climate change, and there is not funding for that right now. Biden and his administration need to take action now to stop further harm to Black, Brown, and Indigenous peoples who are first and most impacted by these decisions. Although he has suspended all lease sales currently in the Arctic Refuge, his promise to combat climate change isn't reflected in his recent decision to support the Master Willow Project, located west of the Arctic Refuge. We need all lands protected that align with the Paris Climate Agreement, and Biden has the power to do this. He can be on the right side of history. We need to stop all fossil fuel extraction and lease sales and build back fossil-free now. Thank you all so much for your support and continued fight to protect our lands. And we have big wins, but we still have a lot of work to do. If you want more information, please visit selainuit.org or Northern Alaska Environmental Center. Thank you. Bye.
Everybody, it is Rev Yearwood, president of the Hip Hop Caucus and host of the Coolest Show podcast. And I come to you today for one reason only, that we must protect the Arctic. We must restore protections to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge by reversing the provisions in the 2017 Tax Act that opened up a leasing program in the refuge. And this must be done through Congress. Congress must pass legislation reversing the provision in the 2017 Tax Act that opened the refuge up to oil and gas exploration by creating a leasing program. Now, the Biden administration, along with Secretary Deb Haaland, have done a lot, and we are so excited about that. But that doesn't solve the problem completely. So now we must actively pursue legislative pathways. As you've heard me say many times, demonstration without legislation leads to frustration. So the most likely way we will see success is through an inclusion on the best budget reconciliation package, since that is how the leasing program was created to begin with. As we know, the Arctic Refuge is critical. It is so important not only to the wildlife and vegetation, but for my dear sisters and brothers who live in that area, my friends, the Gwich'in people, who call the coastal plain the sacred place where life begins. So let us come together and do all we can to preserve the Arctic Refuge, to ensure that we are making sure that we protect the Arctic and we protect that sacred place where life begins in the terms of the Gwich'in nation and people. Let's do it. From the suites to the streets, all power to the people. Protect the Arctic.
Thanks so much, Reverend Yearwood. We are always inspired by your words and how you're rallying behind the Gwich'in people in their fight to protect their lands and their rights. And now I'm excited to introduce the next round of speakers. First up is Ramon Cruz, president of the Sierra Club, followed by Congresswoman DeGette of Colorado, and then we'll hear from the chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee, Rahul Grahova of Arizona. They're all using their voices to advocate for restoring protections to the Arctic Refuge.
It is an honor to share this virtual stage with you. It is also an honor to be joined by so many of the indigenous leaders who have been leading this effort to keep drills out of the Arctic Refuge for so many years, as well as the congressional champions that have stood with us in the fight. I was privileged enough to travel to the Arctic Refuge and visit the Arctic Village in 2019 and experience firsthand just how special this place is and how intertwined it is with the ways of life of the indigenous communities like the Gwich'in and the Inupiat, who have called this area home for thousands of years and refer to its coastal plain as the sacred place where life begins. But rushing to spoil the refuge with drilling was one of the most egregious moves of the Trump administration, posing an existential threat to these communities, putting the entire ecosystem at risk, and driving production of more dirty fossil fuels at a time when our planet, and especially the Arctic, needs us to do exactly the opposite. I'm so proud and thankful for the determination and creativity of this movement that worked to stop them. We rallied in the street and challenged them in court, and we also brought the fight to corporate boardrooms to send a clear signal to oil companies and the banks that fund them that investing in Arctic drilling would be bad business. Thanks to the pressure from this movement, last year every major American bank pledged not to fund drilling in the Arctic. Oil companies clearly got that message as well, because the Trump administration's last-minute lease sale was a total flop. Now we have a presidential administration that understands the need to protect the refuge from drilling, but we know we can't relax just yet. We don't want to have this same fight in another 8 years or 4 years. We need to keep up the same energy and creativity and pressure to make sure that Congress acts immediately to permanently protect the Arctic Refuge from drilling. We have seen time and time again what this movement is capable of, and I feel confident that we can do it. Now I'd like to turn it over to Congresswoman DeGette, who has long been an ally with us in the fight to defend the Arctic Refuge. Representative DeGette, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your lovely introduction, Ramon. I'm so happy to join you, Bernadette, all of the Gwich'in leaders, and folks from around the country in this important event. As we all know, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is one of the most special places on our planet. It's our nation's largest wildlife refuge, and it's a rare piece of the world that remains untouched. Those of us who have had the privilege to visit ANWR and see its pristine beauty for ourselves know just how special it is. I've watched the porcupine caribou migrate across the coastal plain, and I've talked to the Gwich'in people who call this place home. I've experienced firsthand why this place is so magical and why it's so important to keep protecting it. That's because in addition to being the ancestral home of the Gwich'in people, ANWR is also the home to more than 250 species of wildlife, from the snow owls and the snowy geese, of course, to the polar bears who raise their cubs in this area. The threat that ANWR has faced over the years by people just looking to produce a couple more barrels of oil is just inexcusable. And the American people are clear where they stand on this. They want ANWR protected. not destroyed. That's why I'm so proud to stand with you. That's why I'm so proud to continue this fight with you. And we all will continue this fight and preserve this very special place for our world, for our peoples, for the animals who live there, and to make sure that the pristine beauty of ANWR is never compromised. Thank you.
The coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is the heart of this fragile and sacred ecosystem. This is hallowed ground for the Greenwich people, and for many years now, they have fought to protect what they call the sacred place where life begins. This place is special to all of us, and the federal government must protect it for the entire country to enjoy in perpetuity. The refuge is home to polar bears, caribou, and the migratory birds that need healthy habitats to survive. On this first day in office, President Biden took decisive action to protect the National Refuge from destructive oil drilling. And earlier this month, Interior Secretary Deb Haaland suspended the leases sold in the final days of the Trump administration until a thorough environmental review is complete. The Biden administration has taken key steps, but more must be done to protect the Arctic Refuge. We need President Biden to work with us in Congress to provide long-term protections. We need legislative action. Congress now has the best opportunity to act since the refuge was open to drilling in 2017. Climate change is warming the Arctic 3 times faster than the rest of the planet. Protecting the Arctic Refuge is critical if America is going to address the global climate and nature crisis that we confront. We must start today by stopping oil and gas drilling efforts in the refuge. President Biden has committed the U.S. to cutting its greenhouse gas emissions by at least 50% by 2030. We simply cannot achieve this goal if we let companies drill for oil in the Arctic Refuge. We must choose one path, the path of conservation. Congress must act now to restore protections and safeguard this fragile ecosystem that Alaskan communities and wildlife depend on. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Chairman Grijalva and Congressman Degat. You said it, the time to act is now. I work for Audubon, Alaska, and here's a shout out to all the Audubon members out there for joining the rally. If we want Congress to act, we need to show them how important this issue is for Americans from across the country and for folks from across the globe. Seeing so many of you in attendance today is a great first step, and we will need to take many more together. To get us inspired today, here's a short video of folks from around the country standing up for the refuge. And we will be sharing the sign so that you can join the calls to protect the Arctic Refuge.
Thanks to so many great champions for being a part of this effort. You know, many of us have worked to protect the Arctic Refuge for decades, and we've succeeded every time except that one time 4 years ago where that ugly bill passed Congress. Well, now it's our chance to reverse that and protect the Arctic again. It's been a conservation issue, it's a human rights issue, it's an environmental justice issue, and yes, it's a climate change issue. Because as scientists made clear to us, to protect the planet, we need to keep oil in the ground, especially in special places like the Arctic Refuge. So let's make sure we win this time. Now's our moment. Let's seize this opportunity. Let's stop the drilling. Let's save the refuge. Let's do it now. Thank you, Adam. This one's for you.
Thank you, Gene, and thanks to everyone who took a photo and was part of that earlier video montage. You all can join as well. Check out the chat or your email for the file, and be sure to take your own photo with the sign that says Arctic Refuge Protection Forever, and then post it to social media using the hashtag #ProtectTheArctic. And now for how you can make the biggest difference right now, I'm turning it over to my colleague Deanna with Defenders of Wildlife. Take it away.
Hey everyone, Deanna Noel here from Defenders of Wildlife. It's been so inspiring to hear from leaders working together from across the country to defend the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Let's take that energy one step forward by calling on our members of Congress right now and demanding they take legislative action to protect the Arctic Refuge once and for all. Now, if the idea of calling your elected official makes you nervous, don't worry, I'm going to make the first call. After I place my call, we'll put up a 90-second countdown so that everyone watching has a chance to call at least one of your members of Congress. My challenge to everyone is that by the end of the day, you'll have called both your U.S. senators and your U.S. rep. Now, to find their phone numbers, visit www.govtrack.us and enter your zip code. If you can't make a call right now, no worries. We'll drop the instructions and the sample script in the comments of the Facebook Live event. Also, for those of you who will be joining me in calling on your members of Congress, feel free to leave a comment that says which member of Congress you're going to be in touch with. So here we go. Live call to Senator Van Hollen of Maryland. We'll see if they answer.
Hi, this is Chris Van Hollen. Thank you for calling my Senate office on Capitol Hill. If you would like to leave a message about current issues or legislation, or get office information about hours of operation and location, please press 1. If you would like to leave a message on my opinion line, press 1. For office information, thank you for taking time to share your thoughts with me. Your views and concerns are important. Please leave your comments after the tone.
Hello, my name is Deanna Noel. I live in Mount Rainier, Maryland, and I'm calling to ask Senator Van Hollen to do all that he can do to protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge from oil and gas development. I urge him to support any legislative efforts necessary to repeal the drilling program. Thank you. Bye. All right, that was easy. So good luck, everybody. We'll put 90 seconds up now.
Thanks, Deanna. Call made. And thanks to all of you who took action and called your member of Congress just now. If you weren't able to, don't forget to call or tweet at your 2 U.S. senators and representative later on today and tell them to support legislative action that will restore protections to the Arctic Refuge. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today, and I hope that you've been inspired and energized hearing from so many leaders and champions from across the United States and Canada who have been working to protect this sacred place. Seeing all of you here today gives me a renewed sense of hope and reminds me that with all of us working together, we can protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge forever. Thank you so much for being part of Rally for the Refuge.